Ruger GP100. Let's talk about it. This won't be a review video. There's a bunch of the good ones out there that you can look up if you're trying to decide on a gun. Obviously, I thought the GP100 was the best gun in 357 Magnum, which is why I bought it. I got a blued 6-inch barrel, and I've put about 100 rounds to it, 50 38 Special and 50 Cowboy Load 357 Magnum. And I wanted to talk today about it because I had some questions on it and some things I've learned over the last few months, just practicing with it and shooting it and stuff like that. So let's get into it. So Ruger builds their GP100s and really all their guns to last. They prioritize reliability over everything else, which means that when compared to Smith & Wesson right out of the box, the actions won't be quite as smooth, the trigger won't be quite as nice. It's not to say that you can't get there, it's just that initially out of the box they are more on the rugged reliability side as opposed to the actual fine target gun like Smith & Wesson. Smith & Wessons and other brands have been known after extended use of full power 357 Magnum loads to have problems to where you can't really shoot them anymore. Not so with Ruger firearms. The other advantages of Ruger is that, again, they're built to fire full power loads for the entirety of their life, and that you can do small tweaks to them to bring them up to the quality of a Smith & Wesson. At least that's generally the opinion of people that know what they're doing, that have had both guns. So one of the more popular things to do is a trigger switch out, or sorry, a trigger spring switch out. So there's two different springs in the pistol. So, and I've got, it's unloaded. We'll check. There's the hammer spring right here that goes through the grip, and then there's the actual trigger return spring that goes through about right here. You can actually order a kit. The Wolff spring kit is what is typically recommended, and it comes with a bunch of different springs. I'm actually missing a few here, but I think it comes with 4 for each spring, so a total of 8 springs that are all progressively less pounds than the factory springs. The factory springs are 14 for the hammer and 12 for the trigger. And the ones that I was recommended to put in, and I actually did put in, were these right here. So that's the 2 pounds drop on each. So it would be the 12 pounds for the hammer spring, which is this one right here, and it would be the 10 pound for the trigger return spring. Now, out of the box, the trigger, especially in dual action mode, double action, it's very, I mean, you got a lot of resistance. It's not too terrible, but it's not real smooth. One of the nice things about it, and I've got the factory springs in it right now, I'll go into that a little bit later, but there's a catch right here. So if you just draw a full back like this, you're going to flick your off target, which is pretty typical of any gun. But it's more so because in this firearm, just because it's a long, heavy trigger pull, you're trying to get your hammer back, all that stuff. The nice thing about the stock trigger is that there's a little catch right here, and this is actually the same position that if you were to cock the hammer back that it would be in single action. And so you get that nice crisp, pretty much the exact same as the single action. So what you do is, if you're using the stock trigger and you don't want to make any modifications and you want to have good shots in double action, what you do is, well, I didn't do it that time, but you come back to right there and then you pop the rest away. So you can see, you can do it pretty quick. But that'll give you your best shot placement because it'll allow you to stabilize before you actually finish pulling the trigger. So that's what I do. The problem with that is it's still kind of heavy, and I found, like you noticed that the very first time, if I use the tip of my finger, I don't have enough motor control to actually get to prevent it from flinching or going all the way. So I have to kind of use the crease of my first bit of my finger, and it's kind of uncomfortable. So if you put the springs in, and it's a pretty easy job, there's videos on that, I'm not going to show how to do that. Just going down 2 pounds helps a lot. It really smooths out the trigger pull. Even it's amazing the 4 pounds difference. It's so much easier to pull. You can keep it on target better, even if you're just doing a full slap of the trigger. And there's really, I say there's no downsides. Of course, there's always a downside to changing things out. The reason Ruger put in the springs that they did from the factory is that, again, they're going for the rugged reliability. And so to that end, if you're going to be firing, you know, thousands of rounds through your gun over the course of a lifetime, and then you hand it down to your son or grandson or, you know, family members, whatever, Over time, the springs are going to deteriorate. From being compressed, they're going to become, they're not going to work as well. They're not going to have as much force that they can apply. And so over time, through working the trigger and the action, your springs are going to become, closer to like 12 and 10 pounds instead of 14 and 12. And so that's why Ruger did it, is that, hey, they want to make sure that you never have a failure to fire with any ammo you can buy, and those springs are a good way to ensure it. Specifically, you're talking about the hammer spring here. The trigger return spring is more or less to help get your trigger back reset. So once you pull the trigger, once you break past the break point, until the trigger fully returns back to its neutral position, you cannot fire again. And so in a self-defense scenario or panic scenario or whatever, it's better to have a higher poundage return spring, because you don't have to think about letting your finger go. It's gonna have enough poundage to hopefully push your finger back, and then you're gonna have to force it back. Now again, that adds to your double action draw, so it's a trade-off. In this case, the popular opinion, and I'd have to agree with them, is that going down to 2 pounds is the best way to go. There's not been any reports of people having failures to fire going down to these springs. And I found that the trigger return, while it's not quite, it definitely doesn't help you out as much. Really, the only times that I had failure to return to neutral was when I was going too fast and I wasn't paying attention. So I really don't think it'd be an issue in a self-defense scenario, and I don't think that in reality, if you're putting enough rounds through your gun to where you're wearing out springs, the whole kit from Wolff, I think, was $12 from Midway, and so that's for 8 springs. So really, it's very cheap to buy new springs if you find yourself wearing out springs. So I don't really think that there's a downside in practical terms for replacing the trigger springs. So it makes a huge difference. I've seen quite a few people that have shot both Smith & Wesson and Rugers, or have owned both, and they say that the spring job alone is enough to smooth out the differences between the two guns, and then you get the Ruger reliability on top. Another thing to consider is that the gun can be dry fired, and it will help a lot. When I first got the gun, I was practicing my speed reloads and dry firing a ton. And not only is that a good chance for you to really get used to your trigger, but it also allows you to wear in the components. So whereas higher end Rugers or more custom shop builds, Smith & Wessons, Taurus, whatever, what have you, they will be more factory polished. The Ruger comes out and the pieces are thrown together, and it's like a car engine. You got to break it in, and when you do that, a lot of the general rough edges that you can kind of feel in the action where using it will smooth out, and it'll get a lot better. So that's another thing, is if you're not super thrilled with the way the gun works, rather than taking it apart and polishing, which you can do, just practice dry firing. Not only will that give you practice and familiarity with the gun, but it will also wear in the parts and make things smoother. But I do recommend the springs. So I actually sent my gun back for 2 issues: a slightly canted barrel, and an issue I'm going to talk about here in a minute. That's actually a design feature of the gun. But anyway, so I put these springs in here, and then I took them out before I sent them back to Ruger, because they have to replace them with factory springs, and the difference is definitely noticeable. Initially, when I first put these springs in compared to the factory ones, especially after I've been dry firing a lot, I was like, I don't really notice that it's big of a difference. I'm not sure it's worth it. But after putting the factory springs back in, it's noticeably different. So enough about the trigger job. I want to start talking about Speedloaders now. So there's 2 types of Speedloaders on the market. There is the HKS style, or the higher end version, which is this 5-star speed reloader. And they work by, you put the rounds in. In fact, I'll go ahead and do that real quick. So you drop the rounds in, and then you will twist the bottom of it, and that's going to be what holds the rounds in it. So basically, there's a little catch underneath the rim of each cartridge. Hold on, gosh, shot. So I drop them all in right here. I'm going to twist this, and now the cartridges are all in, and I can reload. So this is the HKS style Speedloaders have been around the longest. They're pretty cheap. I think they're like $10 for one, and they're pretty popular. they're the originals, so everybody's familiar with them. I got these 5-star ones because they are quite a bit higher quality than the HKS, and I didn't realize that they were the twist style when I purchased them. I kind of regret buying them now. They're high quality, no doubt, but they were 25 bucks a piece, so I got 2, so that's 50 bucks right there. And I don't really like them, and I'm going to show you why. So you pop open your revolver to reload. With this speed loader, you're going to have to line up the bullets, and because they're kind of loose in here, sometimes it takes a while to get them lined up. You got to be careful not to scuff up your gun, because these things are big enough to where it's close, and it's all metal, so it's close to scuffing up your gun, and I have done that before. Then you've got to hold the cylinder, rotate this, jiggle it to drop them in, and then you're close, and then you're reloaded. And so over the speed loaders I'm about to show you, it has an extra about second on average reload, just because you have to line it up, then you have to grab the cylinder, rotate it, drop them in, jiggle them out, and then pull them out. Whereas the other speed loaders, it's really simple. I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to drop these, and I'm going to reload with my other speed loader, and I'm just going to show you how much quicker it is. Nope. So this is the Safariland speed loader, and I really, really like them, and I wish that I had just gotten these instead of the 5-star, but you live and you learn. So these are, I think, 12 bucks on Amazon, so you can get 2 of these for the price of 1 of these speed loaders. So much better deal. They're all plastic, so you don't have to worry about scuffing your gun. And the nice thing about these is these are push style reloaders. So whereas the other ones, you've got to hold it, twist it, drop them in there. With this speed loader, it's press to release. So all you've got to do is line it up in the back of the cylinder, then press down, and this there's a little push button right here that releases the rounds into the cylinder, and then all you've got to do is close the cylinder, and this will drop off. You don't have to worry about scratching up your gun. You don't have to worry about clearing it, because with these it's kind of hard to clear the grip and the gun, and so it's a lot more straightforward, and it's a lot faster. On average, I can shoot, drop, and reload, and then get my next shot on target in about 3 seconds, which is not too bad. And if I was going faster, I could do a little bit faster than that. Now, there's one little downside to using these speed loaders, and that has to do with the way that the GP100 is designed, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today. I've discovered this when I was practicing a lot, and there's one other video on YouTube about it, and there's a couple of threads and a lot of debate whether it's normal or not. From discussing with Ruger and looking at the design schematics, I'm convinced that this is normal behavior, and that's what the technicians told me as well. But with your cylinder open, there's where the crane attaches right here. Hopefully you can see it. It attaches to the frame. And if you press forward a bit, you can see there's a little bit of a gap there. I'm trying to get it on camera. But there's a spring detent pin in the trigger assembly that holds the crane in. And the problem is that if you put a lot of force on the back, that you're overpowering this detent pin, and the whole cylinder assembly moves forward. And so what happens is if you're doing this kind of reload with these speed loaders a lot, you're going to start weakening that spring, and occasionally the crane will get stuck forward and you won't be able to close your cylinder, which is obviously problematic. Now, one of the guys said that he sent his gun, well, 2 of the guys actually, that this problem was bothering them enough. They sent their gun off to Ruger, and they said Ruger fixed it. I noticed that when I got mine back, they had done the full service on it. And by the way, Ruger's customer service is excellent. It took them about a week to get my gun back to me after I sent it off. They did. They fixed the barrel for me. It was just canted slightly, which is not really uncommon with any gun manufacturer nowadays, unfortunately, just because of the rush to get guns out the line. Most people won't even notice it. But anyway, they did that, and then they completely repolished my gun for me too, which was really nice. And then they did a range test showing, hey, it's hitting on target. So back to here. When I got the gun back, I noticed that initially it wasn't doing that, and it's actually, there's more pressure now. I know that it didn't mess with it because we decided we didn't need to, but what I'm guessing in the instances that the other people were reporting, that either when Ruger put in their new trigger assembly, that spring is just a fresh new spring, and so it had more resistance. And I think that over time, as they continue to do speed reloads, that they will that problem won't happen again. So the way around it is that whenever you're going to speed reload, what I do, and it adds a little bit of time, it's kind of annoying, but it's better than wearing out your spring or whatever, is you wrap my middle finger around in front right here and I support it. And that way when I'm pressing the speed loader in, I'm keeping back pressure on the crane assembly, and that's keeping the cylinder from moving forward. Now note, this is only a problem if you are like me and you reload with your left hand. So the typical way that people are going to speed reload is they're going to eject the cylinder and they're going to pass it over to their left hand. They're going to eject the rounds and they're going to use their right hand to push rounds in the cylinder. Now that's support, because you get my hand wrapped around here, I'm supporting the cylinder and the crane's not going to move forward, the cylinder's not going to move forward. And so it's got a lot more support that way. Now for those of us that are more proficient with our left hand, this is the only reason, it's part of the reason why nobody's really seen it as a problem. There's not many people that reload like this, but I'm a lot faster this way. So what I do is I eject the cylinder, clear all the bullets out of there, and I grab my speed loader and then I push it in. And so with me supporting it right here, I'm able to keep the cylinder from moving forward, get the rounds in really quickly, and then it's a easy push back in the cylinder to get right back on target. So I wanted to discuss that because it's unfortunate to have to send your gun off to get it repaired, especially when it's not actually something that needs to be repaired. And since there's not a whole lot of information about it, I wanted to just clear up that is an actual design function. It allows enough back pressure for the cylinder to rotate, but not enough to... It keeps the crane from falling out, but it also provides adjustable back pressure to the frame so that the cylinder assembly can move freely. And so there's just a little detent and spring, and you can look it up in your manual if you're really interested. There's also a thread with pictures that is really easy to follow, but it's pushing with back pressure. And so if you put too much pressure on the back of the cylinder when it's open, you're going to overpower that spring, and that's what's happening. It won't come all the way out, but it'll come enough to where you have to push it back into place before you can get your cylinder back up. So I would highly recommend using the Safariland Speedloaders, and if you reload with your right hand, then it's not going to be a problem. You're going to be supporting it anyway, but if you reload left-handed, which I recommend you trying because it really is faster in my opinion, then you are going to need to support it with your other finger if you're going to be doing it a lot. So something to keep in mind. The last thing I guess I should talk about is I actually got new sights. Well, I say new sights, I only got a new front sight. I got the HiViz little light bright sight from Amazon. I think it was like 25 bucks. I had seen mixed reviews. I got it. The light retention's not great. Like it's definitely more visible than the factory sight, but not a whole lot more so. I don't really know that it's worth $25. In really low light situations, it really doesn't pick up. It has to have light in order to light up. It's not like it's not a radioactive painted sight where it produces its own light. So that's something to keep in mind if you're looking at sights. I think that eventually I will spend the money to buy a full set of front and rear sights that are essentially glow in the dark. That way there's no question of whether I'll have light or not. But in the meantime, it was worth a shot. So that's really my thoughts and tips and tricks on the Ruger GP100. I really like this gun. I like it a lot. Like I said, I shot several rounds today. I want to go out and shoot some more. At 38 Special, it feels like shooting 22, and even 357 Magnum with these nice hoe grips. You get the muzzle flip, but it doesn't really hurt at all. And I've got some videos of my wife shooting, and you can kind of see that in action. It's pretty accurate, and again, once you get the new springs in, the trigger's really nice, and with the Speedloaders, I mean, really, you can reload really quickly. While I'm thinking about it, these Speedloaders, some people say that they're kind of hard to reload, and that's the downside. I've gotten to where I can actually reload them just as fast as I would the other type of Speedloaders. But here's a tip and trick, and I don't think there's a video on how to do this. So what I do is I'll get the rounds in. You can kind of see they're loose, so they can come in and out. I push them on my palm of my head like this, and then I will take the other side, so this middle part right here, I'm going to rotate it. Well, hold on. It's a little bit harder when you're doing it for camera. But so you rotate it, and then that's what locks the mechanism in place. And so now you can see the rounds are in there. They're not wiggling around, unlike the other Speedloaders, which is really nice. And so it makes it a lot easier to line it up and get in the gun. And so all I got to do is get it lined up on the cylinder, push down on it, and then gravity feeds into. There's a little bit of force, so you get the higher. The other comp, I think this is a comp 2 Safariland. The comp 3, I believe, is a big tall one. And it's actually got spring pressure, and so you can kind of, I think you can almost do it upside down. This is all more or less gravity, so just keep that in mind. But again, if you're reloading like you should be, you won't have any problems getting this in the gun really quickly. So it's a great investment. And like I said, 5-star is nice, not dissing their company by any means. The manufacturing is great, just the design style is inferior to the Safarilands, I believe. And people have talked about, one of the reasons I actually opted for the 5-star first as opposed to the Safariland is that people are like, oh, it's cheap plastic, I don't know how long it'll last. It's really solid plastic. I think that this would last my lifetime pretty much. Of course, these will last 3 or 4 lifetimes, but you've also got to deal with the fact that they're harder to get loaded up on the gun. You're going to scuff your finish if that you care about that sort of thing, and they're just really, they add about a second and a half. In fact, I was showing these to my dad and my brother, showing them why I didn't like it, and I was trying to jiggle it to get the rounds in, and I got them stuck, and like I couldn't get it broke free, and it was my cylinder, and I was like, man, I don't know what to do here, and basically kind of torqued on it, and finally was able to get it broke loose, but that was a little stressful. So really, I should have returned these, but I felt bad returning it just because I chose the wrong thing, as it were. So anyway, I hope that helps. And there's quite a few videos demonstrating all the things I talked about here. I'll try to link them in the description, and give me your comments and feedback. Thanks.